Today is the 9th of December 2012, and the title of the talk today is Poking the Ashes. And I'd like to take up a story from ancient China as the subject of our talk today. And this story takes place between Hyakuzhou and Isan. A few weeks ago, I did a talk on Hyakuzhou and the fox. So I won't go into too much biographical material, but just to say that Hyakuzhou is probably best known for having developed the rules for the monastic life in China, adapting what had come through the centuries from India, and making it really suitable for Chinese culture. He's also very well known for his saying, "A day of no work is a day of no eating." Work being an important part of what monks and nuns do in their training in China and in Japan and Korea. The other protagonist in this story is Isan. Guishan is his Chinese name. In Hyakuzhou's fox, the exchanges were between Hyakuzhou and one of his other disciples, Obaku in Japanese or Huangbo in Chinese. And Guishan is another great disciple, Isan. Hyakuzhou's dates are 720 to 814 and Guishan's 771 to 853. Isan was the founder, along with his disciple Kyozan, of the Igyo school, one of the 5 schools of Zen. It was known for its use of signs and symbols, especially the circle, in its teaching, and it did die out. The two that have survived down to today are of course, the Soto and the Rinzai schools. And the Igyo school got sort of absorbed into the Rinzai tradition. Probably the most well-known story about Guishan, Isan in Japanese, is a koan. It's Guishan kicks over the water bottle. So in this story, Hyakuzhou is looking for a head monk for a temple on a mountain, and the head monk wants this job, the head monk of his present monastery, but Hyakuzhou wants Isan. And so he appoints Isan to go to Mount Gui, which is where he gets his name from, his Chinese name, Guishan. As the masters often are named after the mountain on which their temple is. But when the head monk heard about this, he complains. He says, "I'm the one who was promoted to the position of head monk. Why is the chief cook," which was Isan's position at this time, "going to attain the position of abbot?" And so then Hyakuzhou sets up a kind of a test where he says that if you can say the right words before the assembly of monks, then you can have the position. And so this is like a little test, public test. And Hyakujo puts a pitcher of water down on the floor and asks the question, without saying it's a water pitcher, what is it? And the head monk says, you can't call it a wooden stool. But then Isan, when he's asked the same question, he just comes up and kicks over the jug and goes out. And Hyakujo then laughs and says, the head monk loses. And Isan was duly sent off to this new place to become the abbot. So that's enough about the two characters. And now our story, the story we're going to look at today. And this happened earlier on when Isan was Hyakujo's attendant. Hyakujo asks Isan, who's there? And Isan replies, me. Hyakujo then said to him, stick a poker in the fireplace and see if there's any fire left in it. Isan did so and said, there's no fire left. Hyakujo then took the poker himself and, sticking it deep into the stove, pulled out some hot embers. Showing them to Isan, he said, you said there was no fire left, but what is this? Upon hearing these words, Isan experienced great enlightenment. He then bowed and made his realization known to Hyakujo. Hyakujo said, what you've experienced is a temporary fork in the road. In the scripture it says, if you want to understand the meaning of Buddha nature, then you should look in the realm of temporal causation. When it expresses itself, it is like delusion suddenly turning into enlightenment, like remembering something that was forgotten and realizing that the self and other things do not come from someplace else. Thus the ancient teacher said, enlightenment is but the same as non-enlightenment, without mind and without dharmas. It is just this mind that does not hold to ideas of emptiness, delusion, mundane or sacred. It is the original mind dharma that is, of itself, perfect and complete. Having arrived at this, you must uphold and sustain it. The next day, Isan accompanied Hyakujo to do work on the mountain. Hyakujo said, did you bring fire? Isan said, I brought it. Hyakujo said, where is it? Isan then picked up a piece of wood and whistled twice, then handed the piece of wood to Hyakujo. Hyakujo said, like a termite eating wood. So that's our story. One of the reasons why I picked this one for today was because we're at the end of the year. This is actually the last live Teisho for 2012. This will be away next weekend. So it's the last Teisho before our New Year's celebrations. And it's a time of year when we can feel pretty tired, depleted, burnt out. One of the images of what happens at New Year is a phoenix rising from the ashes. The new year rises out of the ashes of the old year. And a new year will arise, It's really a convention that we celebrate New Year at one time or another. You could say that every day is the start of the new year. But we have this convention, and it brings up feelings in us. Not only can we feel very tired and depleted at the end of the year because of a long year of work, but we can also be looking back at the past year and feel discouraged, feel like we haven't achieved much, that we're not in any different place. The end of this year is it is a time when we look back and we look forward, where we look for some kind of meaning. And we may struggle to find that meaning. And this story is a story about looking in what is dark, burnt out, for something. Looking for the embers in the ashes of the old fire. It's talking here in this story about the great death and the great rebirth. Really about the whole, what's right at the centre of Zen training, of Zen practice. You can just ponder a little bit the meaning of ashes in our culture. In Christianity, you put ashes on your forehead. Ash Wednesday, it's kind of a lowering or humbling to do this. There's that line in the funeral ceremony in in Catholic tradition and the Anglican, of ashes to ashes, dust to dust. In ashes, we touch ashes is to touch our mortality, our emptiness. Associated with repentance too. Ashes are what's left after the fire burns. If we look at this exchange between Hyakujo and Isan, you can kind of flesh it out a little bit. Imagine the scene here. Perhaps Hyakujo is sitting by the stove, and it could be late. He's been there, perhaps reading sutras or doing zazen, and he hears a sound, and he says, "Who's there?" And it's his attendant, Isan, coming in, and he says, "Me." And then Hyakujo asks him whether he can relight the fire, stick a poker in the fireplace, see if there's any fire left. Can't get it going again. So we can interpret this initial question, who's there, just as an innocent exchange, but of course it's also the central question. Who is there Who is really there? What is this? Our ordinary life, our daily life, and this central existential question are not two. So Isan comes up and takes the poker and he sticks it into the stove and he says, no, there's no fire left. But then Hyakujo takes it and he probes deeper into the stove, persists, and finally he's able to just find some tiny little glowing embers, and he pulls them out into the front and he says, you said there was no fire left, but what about this? And on seeing these little glowing fragments, Isan experiences great enlightenment. His mind was illuminated by these glowing fragments, just the way the Buddha's mind was illuminated when he saw the planet Venus in the early morning sky. So he bows and expresses his understanding. And then Hyakujo gives this little teisho. What you've experienced is a temporary fork in the road. You can imagine that Isan would have had a lot of passion in expressing his understanding, and here Hyakujo seems to be just, dampening that fire down a bit now. It's just a temporary fork in the road. And then he says some teaching from the sutras. If you want to understand the meaning of Buddha nature, then you should look in the realm of temporal causation. The realm of temporal causation is just our ordinary daily existence. The realm of cause and effect, of relativity. And he continues, when it expresses itself, it is like delusion suddenly turning into enlightenment, like remembering something that was forgotten and realizing that the self and other things do not come from someplace else. It's the fundamental teaching of the Mahayana, that we don't have to get anything from anywhere else or look in any special place, but turn our attention to this, whatever this is in any given moment. An ancient teacher said, enlightenment is but the same as non-enlightenment, without mind and without dharmas. It is just this mind that does not hold to ideas of emptiness, delusion, mundane or sacred. And this is the key point. This mind that does not hold to ideas. It is the original mind dharma that is of itself perfect and complete. Having arrived at this, you must uphold and sustain it. But we're very resistant to letting go of our ideas and opinions, as we find that very frightening. We armour ourselves with our ideas about things, our ideas about ourselves, about what's right and wrong, about how things should and shouldn't be. And to take off that armour can be terrifying. and yet it's exactly what's required. I just want to turn now to some teaching by Pema Chodron. This is from Start Where You Are, A Guide to Compassionate Living. And she expresses really what Hyakujo was saying. And she's talking here about Lojong practice, which is a wonderful Tibetan teaching of pithy phrases that can help to guide us in our practice. And she says that the central message of this Lojong is to make friends with what we reject, what we see as bad in ourselves and in other people. And at the same time, and this is her now speaking, at the same time we could learn to be generous with what we cherish, what we see as good. If we begin to live in this way, something in us that may have been buried for a long time begins to ripen. Traditionally, this something is called bodhicitta, or awakened heart. It's something that we really have, but usually have not yet discovered. It's as if we're poor, homeless, hungry and cold, and although we don't know it, right under the ground where we always slept was a pot of gold. That gold is like bodhicitta. This is exactly the same image that Master Hakuin uses in the chant that we just did, like a child of rich birth wandering poor on this earth. We endlessly circle the 6 worlds. This is how we are. We're all wandering around, searching for what is right under our feet. Not just under our nose, but our nose itself. She continues, that gold is like bodhicitta. Our confusion and misery come from not knowing that the gold is right here, and from always looking for it somewhere else. When we talk about joy, enlightenment, waking up, or awakening bodhicitta, all that means is that we know the gold is right here, and we realize that it's been here all along. The basic message of the Lojong teachings is that if it's painful, you can learn to hold your seat and move closer to that pain. Reverse the usual pattern, which is to split, to escape. Go against the grain and hold your seat. Lojong introduces a different attitude toward unwanted stuff. If it's painful, you will become willing not just to endure it, but also to let it awaken your heart and soften you. You learn to embrace it. When we take up practice, we're guaranteed that at some point we're going to have to work with discouragement, disorientation, and even despair. Despair at this world we live in, at ourselves. In Zen, we value this despair and take it as a force that can be directed towards awakening. It's referred to in Zen as the great doubt. taking all the questions, all the qualms about this life and pouring them into the koan or into the breath. In Theravadan Buddhism, they talk about disenchantment. Disenchantment is really when we stop relying on the consolations of sense pleasures, but also the consolations of our opinions and our conceits. Somebody called Philip Slater wrote, "Despair is the only cure for illusion. Without despair, we cannot transfer our allegiance to reality. It's a kind of mourning period for our fantasies. Some people do not survive this despair, but no major change within a person can occur without it." So at some point or another, we have to face these cold, dead ashes that seem to have no spark, no burning ember, no life. This story is wonderful in that it illustrates the importance of having a teacher and the role that the teacher plays. Isan looks in those ashes, he looks for that ember, that spark. But his looking is a bit incomplete. But Baizhang, he knows those glowing embers are there. So he pokes deeper, more persistently, and pulls one out and shows it to Isan. To be able to work with someone who sees that spark, who knows it's in you, makes an enormous difference. I think of my own teacher, Bodhin Roshi. The thing that I'm most grateful for is just his faith in me when I didn't have that faith. It was often just enough to keep me going through those times of just only seeing the cold, dead ashes and not seeing the ember. This can make a huge difference. But it certainly doesn't come naturally for us to go into our despair. We usually want to get away from it, keep it at arm's length. But doing that is really just a recipe for sinking into depression. Years ago, copied something down from a Jungian psychologist, Marie-Louise von France. She wrote, "If depressed, be depressed. Go deeper into it. Listen. Go deeper and deeper. Don't try to escape. If the depression says that life means nothing and that nothing is worthwhile, then accept that and say, what about it? Listen. Go deeper and deeper until you again reach the level of the psychological energy where some creative idea can come out, and suddenly, at the bottom, an impulse of life and creativity which has been overlooked may appear." She's not talking here about about giving way to our depression, but of going into it, allowing it. If we're doing breath practice, then it's just as simple as breathing it in when we breathe in, and releasing it as we breathe out. Not trying to get rid of it, not feeding it, but just allowing it. This is mindful awareness of feelings. And seeing the feelings as feelings, the thoughts as thoughts. If we're working on a koan, then it's really pouring this doubt, this despair into the questioning. What is it? Who's there? Who am I at my core? It's a little bit more from Pema Chodron about this sort of non-intuitive turning around of our usual habits around unpleasant feelings and pleasant things. And she takes up one of the Tonglen phrases, which is gain and victory to others, loss and defeat to myself. And she explains that the Tibetan word for pride or arrogance, which is nyangal, is literally in English, me victorious, me first, ego. That kind of me victorious attitude is the cause of all suffering. And this is where we can start to see the real value of our states of despair, because they're the opposite of me victorious. It's the feeling often behind despair is me completely at a loss, me not knowing where to turn, what to do, how to proceed. And this is why it has so much value in it. Me defeated, me having descended into a dark, cold, barren place. She says, in essence, what this little saying is getting at is that words like victory and defeat are completely interwoven with how we protect ourselves, how we guard our hearts. Our sense of victory just means that we guarded our heart enough so that nothing got through, and we think we won the war. The armour around our soft spot, our wounded heart, is now more fortified, and our world is smaller. Maybe nothing is getting in to scare us for one whole week, but our courage is weakening and our sense of caring about others is getting completely obscured. Did we really win the war? On the other hand, our sense of being defeated means that something got in. Something touched our soft spot. This vulnerability that we've kept armoured for ages, something touched it. Maybe all that touched it was a butterfly, but we have never been touched there before. It was so tender. Because we have never felt that before, we now go out and buy padlocks and armour and guns so that we will never feel it again. We go for anything. 7 pairs of boots that fit inside each other so we don't have to feel the ground. 12 masks so that no one can see our real face. 19 sets of armour so that nothing can touch our skin, let alone our heart. These words, defeat and victory, are so tied up with how we stay imprisoned. The real confusion is caused by not knowing that we have limitless worth and that the confusion deepens each time we buy into this win-lose logic. If you touch me, that is defeat, and if I manage to armour myself and not be touched, that's victory. Realising our wealth would end our bewilderment and confusion, but the only way to do that is to let things fall apart, and that's the very thing that we dread most, the ultimate defeat. Yet letting things fall apart would actually let fresh air into this old, stale basement of a heart that we've got. Saying loss and defeat to myself doesn't mean to become a masochist, kick my head in, torture me, and dear God, may I never be happy. What it means is that you can open your heart and your mind and know what defeat feels like. You feel too short. You have indigestion. You're too fat and too stupid. You say to yourself, nobody loves me. I'm always left out. I have no teeth. My hair's getting grey. I have blotchy skin. My nose runs. That all comes under the category of defeat, the defeat of ego. We're always not wanting to be who we are. However, we can never connect with our fundamental wealth as long as we are buying into this advertisement hype that we have to be someone else, that we have to smell different or have to look different. On the other hand, when you say victory to others instead of wanting to keep it for yourself, there's the sense of sharing the whole delightful aspect of yourself. You did lose some weight. You do like the way you look in the mirror. You suddenly feel like you have a nice voice, or someone falls in love with you, or you fall in love with someone else. Or the seasons change and it touches your heart. With anything that you want, you begin to develop the attitude of wanting to share it instead of being stingy with it or fearful with it. So it's really, this phrase turns things upside down, but in a way that is incredibly helpful. It's really the essence of bodhicitta. To share what we can share of our wealth, you could say, and to own our poverty fully. Go into it. What's happened in our culture, though, is despair doesn't really even have a place, especially since Prozac came along. Some writers talk about the medicalization of despair, the way in which now sadness, despair are seen as mood disorders that need to be treated with pharmaceuticals. Miriam Greenspan points out that in the DSM-4, which is the sort of Bible of psychiatry, that if you feel sad for more than 2 weeks in a row, then that's classed as being abnormal. It's extraordinary, really, when you think about it, when you think that when we really look at our world, there are good reasons to feel despair. It could be a sign of sanity, actually. And one of the things that's been happening in recent years is that there is more and more depression around. And apparently each successive generation of young people are more lonely and depressed than the one before. think of especially of what we human beings are doing to our air and earth and water and animals. We're in the sixth great period of mass extinction in the history of the world right now, and this is caused by human activity. So there are very good reasons to feel sad. But the sadness really turns into depression that is paralyzing because we don't really face it, we don't really go into it. We try to hold it at bay, and it doesn't work. What happens if we do go into it is that it changes. One of the greatest poems of this process in Western culture is the Divine Comedy by Dante. And in this, he tells this story, this great, vast story which encompasses the whole universe, about his search for meaning. He in his actual life, he was exiled, and it sent him into a very desolate and dark place. And his poem starts with his character in the poem, which is himself, becoming lost in a dark wood, where he says, "Dove la dritta via era smarrita," which means whether the right way was lost. So he's searching for the way, for the Tao, and he finds it by descending. He has to go down through all the circles of hell, through all the corruption and depravity of every kind, every stamp, facing all of it, descending down into this deep pit until he gets to the very center of the earth, where Satan is stuck in a great frozen lake. And he keeps going down, actually reaching the center of the earth. And he keeps going down, but his going down, because he reached the center of the earth, becomes an ascent, a going up. And he comes out on the other side of the planet, on the shores of Mount Purgatory. And the very end of Inferno is his emerging out of this pit to see the stars again. And we navigate by the stars. They guide us. And so from this descent, this going down and down and down, that just turns into emergence without his changing anything. He just has to go fully into it, and he emerges. The quality of despair has this stopping, like a frozen lake, that everything stops. Really, this stopping is can be helpful. It's really a calling on us to stop our are running around and make sense. To examine what we haven't examined. To touch and name what our most feared demons are. In this, we can rely on something very simple and absolutely and utterly reliable, and that is the law of impermanence. No descent is forever. No ascent is forever. We have this saying, what goes up must come down, but equally, what goes down must come up. These are absolutely ironclad laws. And when we can come to our despair and our discouragement, understanding that, holding to that, then we can come to our despair with a kind of lightness and openness that will help it to flow through. Elie Wiesel, Holocaust survivor, said, "If you seek a spark, you will find it in the ashes." Well, our time is up, so just finish with part of Mumon's commentary to Josh's dog, Koan Mu. His instructions to those who are practicing with Mu. So then, make your whole body a mass of doubt, and with your 360 bones and joints and your 84,000 hair follicles, concentrate on this one word, Mu. Day and night, keep digging into it. Don't consider it to be nothingness. Don't think in terms of has and has not. It is like swallowing a red-hot iron ball. You try to vomit it out, but you can't. Gradually, you purify yourself, eliminating mistaken knowledge and attitudes that you have held from the past. Inside and outside become one. You're like a mute person who has had a dream. You know it for yourself alone. Suddenly, Mu breaks open. The heavens are astonished. The earth is shaken, and it is as though you have snatched the great sword of General Quan. When you meet the Buddha, you kill the Buddha. When you meet Bodhidharma, you kill Bodhidharma. At the very cliff edge of birth and death, you find the great freedom. In the 6 worlds and the 4 modes of birth, you enjoy a samadhi of frolic and play. How then should you work with it? Exhaust all your life energy on this one word, Mu. If you do not falter, then it's done. A single spark lights your Dharma candle. We'll stop there and recite the 4 vows.